Welcome to this explainer. Have you ever actually stopped and wondered why one of the single biggest purchases you're ever going to make in your entire life feels so incredibly convoluted? Today, we are unpacking the surprisingly complex and honestly fascinating economics of the US car market. We're going to focus specifically on a phenomenon known as the middleman monopoly. We're going to look at the history, follow the hidden money, and check out the massive legal battles happening right under our noses. So, why is buying a car so painful? It's pretty much a universal frustration, isn't it? You go in, you're super excited to pick out a new vehicle, and then you leave feeling completely exhausted, stressed out, and quite often a whole lot lighter in the wallet than you originally intended. Well, let's dive into this because the hidden mechanics that make this whole process so stressful and so expensive, they are way more deeply entrenched than you might realize. Section 1, the dealership illusion. Let's start by looking at how the modern car buying journey is actually structured today. To really get a feel for this, let's walk through the journey of a hypothetical buyer. Say they live in Steamboat Springs, Colorado. They do their homework, they research an Audi Q3, and they realize the closest authorized dealer is like over 2 hours away in Glenwood Springs. So they drive all the way out there. The building looks like Audi, the signs say Audi, the website looks like Audi. But what they don't realize, they aren't actually buying a car from Audi. They're entering a 10-year relationship with a Fortune 500 middleman company like Sonic Automotive. Sonic owns the dealership, not Audi. They don't manufacture a single car, yet they control the entire transaction. And this really highlights just how uniquely restrictive the American system is. I mean, if we look globally, the contrast is absolutely staggering. Here in the US, you are legally forced to use a franchise middleman to buy a new car. But look at the rest of the world. Over in China, if you want an EV from BYD, you literally just go directly to BYD's website. In the EU, you can work directly with the manufacturers to custom order the exact color, the trim, the specs you want. You are not just limited to whatever leftover inventory some middleman happens to have sitting on their lot. Section 2, a history of protectionism. So why on earth does this mandated middleman system even exist in the first place? Well, let's trace the timeline back a bit. In the early 1900s, this model actually made a lot of sense. Ford needed to expand really rapidly, so they used local franchise partners who actually knew their communities to sell the cars, while Ford just focused on building them. But by the 1920s, the big three automakers had grown incredibly powerful, and they started bullying these small local dealers, forcing them to take on inventory they couldn't sell or just freezing them out entirely. In response to that, by the 1950s, these dealers used their local influence to aggressively lobby state legislatures for protection. Fast forward to today, and those protected mom-and-pop shops, yeah, they've morphed into massive, consolidated corporate monopolies that basically dominate their regions. The result of that 1950s lobbying push was just an absolute legislative victory for the dealers. By mid-century, all 50 states had enacted laws explicitly banning manufacturers from selling their own cars in states where they already had established franchise dealerships. And that legal armor, which was secured literally decades ago, it still forcibly prevents a manufacturer from simply opening up a showroom down the block to compete with a dealership today. All right, Section 3, the hidden profit playbook. Let's follow the money and dive into the actual financial mechanics of a modern car dealership. To understand their playbook, you've got to understand these two very distinct revenue streams. First up, you have the front-end gross. This is basically just the profit the dealer makes by selling the car at a sticker price that is higher than the invoice cost they paid the manufacturer. Pretty straightforward. But then there's the back-end gross. Now, this is the profit generated purely through financing deals and office add-ons. And as we're about to see, this is where the economics of buying a car dramatically shift. Let's look at that front end first, $4,400. Let's say our Steamboat Springs buyer agrees to pay the sticker price of $48,170 for their new Audi Q3. They might walk away feeling like they got a fair deal, right? They avoided a massive markup. But that sticker price is already $4,400 over the reported invoice cost. And keep in mind, that includes inescapable destination and shipping fees for a car the buyer didn't even get to custom order from the factory. So the dealership is already winning big before you even step off the showroom floor. But then the buyer is handed off to the F&I manager. That's the finance and insurance manager. You sit at their desk, probably thinking this person is just an administrative worker helping you sign some paperwork so you can finally get out the door. But get this, their salary ranges from $100,000 to $500,000 a year. It's wild, right? The seemingly mundane paperwork person is actually the highest level, most experienced salesperson in the entire building. And believe me, they earn that massive salary by deploying what we can basically call their upsell arsenal. While you, the buyer, are emotionally exhausted, your guard is down, and you're thinking the deal is completely done, they hit you with this list: high interest financing, extended warranties, gap insurance, winterization, paint and wheel insurance. These are often highly profitable add-ons, strategically pushed to maximize that back-end gross profit we talked about earlier. So how effective is this playbook? Well, incredibly effective. In 2025, Sonic Automotive reported that their F&I earnings netted a gross profit of over $2,500 per unit sold, just on the back end alone. When you combine that front-end markup, the fees, and this back-end masterclass, a car that cost the dealership $44,000 from Audi easily becomes a $56,000 purchase for the consumer. Section 4. The direct-to-consumer threat. Let's look at the modern disruptors challenging this deeply entrenched system. Because it's not just us consumers who are tired of this. Even the legacy manufacturers are turning against the model. In 2021, Ford CEO Jim Farley publicly threatened to actually cut vehicle allocations to certain dealerships. Why? Because the extreme markups these dealerships were slapping on cars were creating an incredibly hostile consumer environment, and ultimately, that really damages Ford's brand reputation. But here's the catch. Because of those mid-century protection laws we talked about, Ford's hands are largely tied in how they can actually discipline their own sellers. Enter the ultimate disruptor, 320. That is the sheer scale of Tesla's direct-to-consumer showroom and service network across the United States today. Tesla completely bypassed the franchise model, opting to own and staff all of their locations directly. But getting to 320 locations, that was not easy. They literally had to fight state dealership lobbies tooth and nail in court for over a decade. So how did they pull that off? Honestly, there's some incredibly clever legal maneuvering. They basically argued that because Tesla never had existing franchises to begin with, those 1950s protection laws shouldn't even apply to them. In states with super strict rules, they operated through loopholes, like they ran only a single direct sales location for the entire state of Colorado for years. And in states like Connecticut and New Mexico, where they were just totally blocked, they strategically partnered with Native American reservations so they could operate direct sales on sovereign land, completely bypassing state laws entirely. And this legal battlefield? It's highly active right now. Like in 2026, Sonic Automotive actually sued the state of Colorado for issuing a direct-to-consumer license to Scout Motors. Sonic's argument here is that because Scout plans to make plug-in hybrids, and because they're backed by Volkswagen, which, already has a huge franchise network, they shouldn't qualify for these EV direct sales loopholes. Regardless of who is technically right in the eyes of the law, this really highlights just how fiercely these middlemen monopolies are going to defend their protected territory from absolutely any new competition. Which brings us to Section 5, an outdated status quo. Let's zoom out a bit to examine the macro implications of this protectionist economy on everyday Americans. If you've ever felt like the process is rigged against you, well, the data shows you are definitely not alone. 70% of respondents do not trust dealers to be honest about pricing, and a whopping 80% suspect hidden fees. This legally mandated system has basically created a deeply distrusted consumer environment where buyers feel like they just constantly have to be on guard against being overcharged. In fact, this system is so antithetical to standard American economic ideals, free choice, open competition, that the Federal Trade Commission has actually stepped in. The FTC has officially stated its stance in favor of adopting direct-to-consumer sales. They recognize that the forced dealership model is fundamentally backward when it comes to actual consumer protection. Which brings us to our final thoughts. As the rise of EVs continues to force this massive legal reckoning in courts all across the country, what exactly happens next? Will the United States finally abandon this mandated mid-century dealership model? Or will exhausted consumers eventually just opt out of the car buying headache entirely, looking instead toward things like robust public transit and better mobility alternatives? It's a massive shift in how we think about ownership, and it's definitely a space we all need to be watching closely. Thank you so much for joining me on this explainer, and keep questioning the systems around you.